What's up, everybody? Mike, how do we say this for real? Is it Ouija, 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 Ouija?
I prefer to call it Bob.
The Bob board?
Yeah, the Bob board. Actually, I prefer my boards to be Zozo boards.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Ooh, the Zozo board. I love that story so much.
There's not much of a difference between a Zozo board and a regular old Ouija board, is there?
No, it just says Zozo on it, and it's got some cool arts, but it's basically the same thing. But I don't know the proper way to say it. I always called it a Ouija board, but that makes zero sense when you look at the way it's spelled. Why is it Ouija? I've never heard the A make an E sound. So I don't know.
Funny enough, it's ancient Egyptian.
That is funny.
That's the last thing I thought.
That was a knee slapper. So it's an Egyptian word.
Yes, sir, for good luck.
Huh. Fancy that. I had no idea.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the Ouija board and some spooky goings-on that happens when you mess with them. And I wanted to look at the history of them, and I was surprised at what I read. I'm not a big fan of Ouija boards. I don't mess with them. I don't recommend anybody messing with them. So
I never used one like in a real manner. My friends had one, and we fucked around on it when we were kids, but I'll admit I was always the one that was pushing it. Yeah, it was me. But I never we would typically get bored with it after a minute or two, probably because I was pushing it the whole time, and I wasn't doing anything spooky. But I never really got anything from it. I did do it at a Halloween party one time as well, and again I didn't push it this time, but somebody was, but nobody would admit to it, and I don't know. I don't think that it was anything real, but I can kind of see maybe how that sort of thing could open things up to contact, maybe, or maybe it's just contacting your subconscious, but you're unaware of it, so you're like manifesting this force that's kind of driving your own hand to move things around, and it knows things because you know things.
Yeah, I've never messed with one. There was a time where I believe it was my sisters and where their friends busted one out, and they were going to mess with it. And I think even as a little kid, I was like, I'm out of here. I'm not messing with those. That's something my dad has always warned me about, is not to mess with those. So I've never messed with one, even in a game type fun party setting.
Well, I think when I did it, I was very young, and I still believed that ghosts were the spirits of the returned dead, and that you could contact them through this board. But I think really what you're doing, because I think intent has a lot to do with it, and if we're talking about non-physical entities and things that exist in a non-physical reality, or a reality that we don't have access to, especially if they're parasitic, like we've talked about in the past, where they're feeding off of human emotion and trying to elicit a certain response. I think when you're opening yourself up to communicating, like you're using a tool with the intent to reach across and contact someone, I think really what you're doing is you're doing the equivalent of going outside during the summer with a lantern and just setting the lantern down in front of you and basically calling to all the moths and gnats and mosquitoes that are out there to come, because you brought the beacon into the darkness. And when you're using those and you're putting you're calling out to, what you think is the other side, it's, who knows really what it is. It's something far beyond our understanding, but you're calling out to wherever this place is, or whatever beings exist there, and basically saying, I'm ready to open up a line of dialogue with something that I shouldn't be able to do. And we talked recently in an episode about maybe certain entities being responsible for mental illnesses, rather than like demonic possession. Maybe they're able to cause this by manipulating human minds in a certain way. And if that's the case, maybe they're able to get into that human mind and communicate that way. And that's like their way to get in. They're pulling on things from the subconscious mind, and it's causing them to create these messages on the board. So essentially they're communicating with themselves because they're being manipulated by this other entity. Or maybe it's even like a weird tulpa effect type thing, where they're manifesting this being within their own subconscious and causing this like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, I definitely think that messing with the Ouija board is, maybe it's not a portal to be able to communicate with the dead. That's just what we as humans call it. Who knows, like you said, what we're opening ourselves up to communicate with when we mess with these things. But I don't know, I kind of bend the way of the Ouija board just gets you into the right frame of mind to be able to communicate with these things. Like your analogy with the lantern in the dark woods, turning that on is going to attract all the moths and gnats that's around. That's true. But I kind of put myself mentally in the dark forest with just a lantern and putting it on a floor and sitting in front of it. That to me is almost like a powerful enough situation, as much as messing with a Ouija board. If I wanted to sit out there and try to communicate with a spirit, it's almost like I don't think I'd need a Ouija board to communicate with spirits if I was in that setting. So do you think that the Ouija board's more of an actual tool that opens up some type of phone line to whatever type of entity, or it's just something that gears people's minds up into getting into that state? Because whoever's messing with one is obviously wanting to make contact with a spirit.
I don't think that it's the Ouija board itself that opens up the gateway. I think it's a tool that helps facilitate that contact. And I think the main driving force here would be the intent and the will of the user. And I don't think that kids at a slumber party fucking around are going to be summoning anything. They're going in with expectations, but they're not going in with any real intent behind it, other than to maybe get scared or get a little bit of a fright. But they're not going in deliberately looking to speak with other entities with real intent behind it.
Do you think that's why there's not millions of possessed teenagers all over the world? Because
absolutely.
Because they're not coming with that energy. They're just coming with goofy, funny, let's have a gag energy.
Yeah.
Useless to whatever spirit.
Like, hey, Ouija board, does Bobby like Sally? And then it goes to yes, and then they all giggle. Because fucking Samantha was the one that moved it to yes, because she's friends with Bobby's sister, and Bobby's sister told her that Bobby does, in fact, like Sally. So she moved it to yes, and like, oh my God, you're going to marry him. And they're all like fucking 8 and don't know any better, but the spirit said it, so it's got to be true. And then, they go on living their lives.
Whatever spirit
they're
says,
not
like,
really.
Whatever spirit says, like,
spirit's
shit.
like, oh, are you fucking kidding me? Yes, Bobby likes you. God damn it, this sucks.
I can't use any of this shit.
Can't you just ask your friend? Why do you need to summon a fucking demon to find out if Bobby likes you? I got better things to do, god damn it.
We're reading about the Ouija board. I was shocked to see how far back it went. Not maybe not the Ouija board itself, but the first mention of using some type of auto writing or letterboard to communicate with the dead comes from the 1100 AD writings from the Song Dynasty, China. And in the writings, I guess they're pretty specific. This is a method of communicating with the dead. So this was not originally a board game meant for parties.
So that was the intent, not to communicate with spirits or gods or demons. It was specifically to contact the dead that they were created.
From what I understand, well, spirits in general.
Okay, so otherworldly, non-physical beings.
Yeah, it definitely could take the place and call itself a person, but they were called letter boards or talking boards, and there's a lot of use of that in a lot of cultures, but it really took off during America's spiritual awakening age, which was going pretty strong since the Victorian era and peaked in the 1800s, which we all know there's the cool photos of people standing next to ladies in robes and shit and flying chairs and all the bad photography fakes.
And the black and white pictures of the ectoplasm coming out of their nose and ears and whatnots.
Yeah. But of all the devices that they were using at the time, they actually came from this dude named Dr. Robert Hare, who was a devout Christian who set out to debunk and dispel the spiritual movement. And he did so by building devices that he thought he'd be able to use to communicate with these so-called spirits that were talking to everybody at these dinner party seances and shit. And after he built a few things, he started using them, and he became totally convinced that he was talking to the spirits of the dead. So he went on to make most of the devices that were used in the 1800s to communicate with the dead. And one of the main things I noticed that almost before this Ouija board, as we know it, was created, and even using letter boards or talking boards, they would use just a planchette, which is the thing that everybody holds, which the spirit is supposed to move, but they would affix two wheels to the back part of it. In the front, there was a hole in which a pencil would go into, and everybody would hold it and they would ask their questions, and it would auto-write. They would put paper underneath and would write out the response, which is way cooler than...
That's way cooler.
Yeah.
Than having to wait for it to just go from letter to letter, and then... Was that a stop, or did he just slow down? Do we count that cue? Does that cue have any significance? Mm-hmm. What's the deal? No, he's actually writing here.
Did he say queef? What's happening?
Yeah. No, I think it was just weef. I don't think that cue counted.
They didn't say queef back then, right?
No, they called it a ueef. That's how the cue got added. The cue got added because of misinterpreting the spirits.
But yeah, that thing sounds like it would be way more definitive and a lot more in the way of supporting some type of entity. I guess to me, if five people are holding on to it, you can't say that it's anything really.
I think you're with that writing thing though. You're gonna suffer from the same thing. You're gonna have just some asshole at the party just moving things around to freak everybody out and to make it interesting, because no one's going to find it interesting if the planchette doesn't move. And that's a fact.
Most definitely. That's one of the main reasons why I've just always turned my nose at Ouija boards. Not a lack of respect for them, but just something like that. If I'm going to do something, if I've got something in front of me that's a physical tool, and this tool has a bunch of fucking letters on it, and I've got this planchette I'm supposed to hold and talk to the air and have something control this planchette while it's being held, that type of test, that type of experiment, that type of experience is something I'd have to go through by myself. There could not be another influence like somebody's hand on this planchette, let alone 4 or 5 people. I just can't take any type of Ouija board session seriously. That's something I would have to experience on my own and experience this thing moving on its own accord, truly.
Yeah, like a one-on-one sort of situation.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can do that. I'm sure. I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
how many of you guys listening have
it's
messed with a Ouija board, but if you know about it and you're able to do that on your own, doesn't mean I'm going to fucking do it. But that I'm just saying for me, that's the
but
type of.
even then, I think that it could it could possibly be yourself doing it without you realizing it.
Yeah, very
And
true.
you know, it could just be the subconscious, like when you put on noise canceling headphones, you don't hear silence. Your brain makes up a noise. There's always that like white noise sound that you hear. It's never nothing. Your brain will come up with something. And like when you close your eyes, when you're awake, you'll see things, you'll see patterns. It won't just be black, it won't be nothing. Your mind will make stuff up. And I think if you come at something with enough will and with a very specific purpose in mind, that you might be able to psych yourself out. And I don't mean to be a fucking a Joe Nickel stick in the mud here, because I'm listening to myself talking. I'm like, you kind of sound like one of those assholes. Like, oh well, clearly there's no such thing as demons, and the people are fooling themselves. But that could be the case. I'm not saying that's always the case, because there's things that have come up in certain stories with involving the Ouija board, or certain experiences involving the Ouija board, where things happened that could not be explained by the subconscious mind, like the whole Zozo thing that we talked about, all the wacky shit that went along with that case, and the fact that it moved from multiple different people, and multiple people experienced it, and there was definitely more to that than one individual's subconscious mind controlling his hand to create messages. And there's other cases like that as well. And there's one that I'll be getting into in a bit. But I think, like a lot of these things, a lot of the unexplained and paranormal things, that there's so many different experiences that occur. And the human mind is so varied, and the human memory is so flawed, that I think some things get confused. And I'm not going to be someone that says people are making up a story. If they're telling a story and they've got nothing to gain from it, and they seem to be telling the truth, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to say that I believe that they're telling the truth. That doesn't necessarily mean that their perception of the events that happened are 100% accurate by any means.
Definitely.
You've got to take into consideration things like fear or expectations, and all these things can create a bias towards the experience, and that bias could lead someone down a road that a third party or a bystander might not follow. So for everyone that sees a shooting star in the sky, there's going to be someone out there that thinks that shooting star is an alien spacecraft that blew up in the atmosphere.
Right.
And there's all manner of these things, like people taking pictures at a haunted house, and they get one back and they see an orb on it. Are they viewing that orb as a ghost because they took it in a haunted house? Or are they looking at the other variables? Was it dusty? Was there insects around? Could it have been a moth, perhaps? Are there any defects to the camera? There's a lot of explanation for orbs, and orbs can't always be used as evidence. And I basically what I'm saying is, if you've had a experience with a Ouija board, don't automatically think that you're talking to someone who was dead, or a spirit from another realm. It could just be you. Just really think about it, and think about some of the things that you're asking it. Are the answers that you're getting answers that you personally know? Or are you getting answers are Are you getting the answers that you expect or answers that you want versus answers that are accurate? You know, maybe Bobby doesn't really like Sally. Maybe she just really wants him to, so she gets the yes answer because it's something that she really wants.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not real. He doesn't like her. Bobby's over there trying to make out with Samantha.
Yeah, I think
Bobby's a little player.
I definitely think that people have to take that into account more. I mean, with everything, I don't investigate haunted houses, and I've said on the show many times I'm very apprehensive to do anything like that, and will only have to engage with those things if I have to. But it's not like I haven't. And in the situations where I was at a place that was supposed to be haunted, or a place that was just even fucking spooky, the shadows turned into monsters for me. My mind would run away with me. And I know that I'm not meant for that. But I know firsthand how easily a tree branch can look like a hand, you know? It's just, everything can happen when you're in a situation where you're expecting some type of unexplained, scary, or unknown event to happen. And when you add the planchette and having to hold on to it and other people, you just, I mean, I don't see how. I mean, I wonder how many times people go to a Ouija board session and they go to move it purposely and someone else pulls it the other way. And just they look for some weird look on somebody else's face.
And they start getting in a tug of war and they think they're doing a tug of war with the spirits.
Yeah, exactly.
I would be interested to know for the people that actually go to like a medium or you know, one of those type places, if they're using a Ouija board or some other tool, like, or even the mediums that are just able to communicate with the dead. I wonder if there's ever, because it always seems like whenever someone goes to a medium that there's always somebody that comes through to talk to them. But wouldn't it be funny if you make an appointment with a medium, you go in and she sits there and looks at you and she's like, yeah, I got nothing. No one wants to talk to you. There's nobody here. And you're just like, dude, I would like to talk to, how about my goldfish from second grade? Is my goldfish? No, your goldfish tells you to fuck off. Well, at least it's something.
Yeah, at least it's something. At least they
at least they acknowledge me.
Yeah.
Like, it's just it. And I don't know if that's a testament to the ability of those sorts of people, or if maybe it's not maybe they're not really contacting otherworldly intelligence. Maybe instead they are maybe they're somehow able to draw the information like psychically, you know, like because I think a lot of these you can well, I shouldn't say you can always, but in a lot of cases you can spot the shysters and the people that are just using like classic carny tricks and things like that to get to get their information. They're, you know, ask leading questions. But then there's others that they just kind of present information. And to me, that's the interesting stuff. And sure, you could say they're just kind of throwing guesses out there and seeing what will connect. And in a lot of cases, they're able to do that. But there's sometimes where there's things that they just don't have any way of knowing.
Oh, yeah.
But somehow they do.
Yeah, I was just watching a really cool episode of Unsolved Mysteries, and they had this lady who saw some news report. You know, they were looking for this person who killed this lady, and she's an artist, and she had a dream of the killer's face. So she drew it and was so compelled by her drawing that she took it to the police, and that led to this person's arrest. And they put the person who was arrested and her drawing up, and it was fucking ridiculous. It was the same person. So she decided to mess around to see how good she can do that, and would go to old places where murders happened, you know, 100 years ago. And she would start drawing people, and then they would look it up and be like, yeah, this was the person who was murdered here. She was just able to nail it every single time. And that you can't explain. She has no knowledge of these things. And there's been people caught bullshitting their way through doing stuff like that. But it was just there's a difference between that and look into my crystal ball for sure.
Fortune for a quarter. I love quarters. Did you have that machine out there?
Oh, no, I'm sure there was one at some point, but that thing was weird to me.
We had this arcade. It was a pizza place, and they had an arcade in it, and it was like, you know, those love meters where you put your finger on it and it basically tests your pulse and tells you how sexy you are or whatever.
Oh yeah.
They had another one. It was it looked like a gypsy woman, and there was a glowing ball, and you'd put your finger on these two sensors, and but the machine would always say, "Fortune for a quarter. I love quarters." Or, "Give me a quarter, I'll tell you your fortune." And so you'd put a quarter and you'd put your hand on it, and then it would give you some stupid fortune like, "Your future looks bright, better buy sunglasses." You know, it was just a fucking, yeah.
Thanks for the quarter, bitch.
Yeah, basically. I remember being very disappointed in it, and I was like, "Fuck you, gypsy lady, I'm not going to try you anymore." Except I was a kid, so I was probably like,
"Oh man,"
swearing. Yeah, it's like, "Oh man, you ripped me off. I could have played a video game with that quarter.
Yep.
Stupid butthead."
Yeah, but back to the history of this Ouija board thing.
Oh yeah.
That planchette. Well, I was going to go off on another tangent, but I'll save that till we at least get through the history of this thing. But that planchette by itself was used in the 1830s, but it wasn't until 1890 to where a businessman named Elijah Bond got the idea to sell the planchette with one of these talking boards, these letter boards, together as a set. And then by 1901, the name Ouija was coined. And we've always asked, when did the Ouija board sneak its way into fucking Toys R Us? And that was by 1920. It was sold as a goddamn toy. So, but it's always been used as just that. But apparently it was such a popular item that, I mean, it just, everybody had one. I mean, this guy, this Dr. Hare, I was watching this documentary. It's a short documentary. I found this really fucking great website called The Mysterious Planchette. And this dude has a collection of fucking, he's got the coolest collection of planchettes there is. And he actually has some of the only known existing devices that this Dr. Hare made. And apparently this Dr. Hare dude was like a rock star when it came to being hardcore Christian and being a scientist and a professor. And for him, this guy in this documentary said for him to come out and say this spiritualistic movement, talking to the dead, is real, and then dedicating the rest of his life to making devices to do so, was pretty much the equivalent of Neil deGrasse Tyson coming out and saying, "Heaven is real. We've looked up and there is a place in the clouds where there's a white castle," and everybody, you know, so it was a big deal. So apparently it was just so much in everybody's house that, I mean, I guess it started to where every store needed to carry it, right? I mean, it had to be just in stores before Parker Brothers fucking started making it, right?
Was it Parker Brothers that did it?
I don't know.
I bet Parker Brothers and Milton Bradley probably both did it.
Yeah.
And probably whatever other companies, Blammo. Is there a Blammo one? Remember Blammo?
Oh yeah.
Is that a thing anymore? I just remember that wacky 80s / early 90s announcer voice. By Blammo. But yeah, I would have to think it was probably marketed by some company before the big companies came in and slapped their brand on it.
But not even like the marketing and big branding it. Just think of any other object that had to appear in the local general store in the 1800s so often and requested enough that it just appeared in every store, and then in the big department stores, and then just thrown in the toy section. Like it never went away. That's bizarre, to where it's like you go to the store, get some sugar, we need some flour, rice, and see if they have any Ouija boards, will ya?
Yeah.
It's weird.
Check out those Ouija boards. It is weird. Like, especially that something that seems like it should be so forbidden is just it's in the game section of a toy store.
Yeah, it was meant to communicate with dead people, with spirits, but it's in it.
And it became a children's game.
Yeah, I worked at Toys R Us, and
it's part of.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's part of Satan's plan to corrupt the innocence of our world. He's clearly just putting everything out there, and from pop music to board games to Dungeons and Dragons, which I guess would be a board game, so I'm being redundant. But he normalized the Ouija board, and now we've got Harry Potter. He's making magic normal. This is ridiculous. Everybody knows wizards are evil. If you use magic, then you're in league with the devil, and you're fucking lucky they made it illegal to burn you at the stake, because I'm telling you, you go running around with a fucking magic wand a few hundred years ago.
You walk around and see your dad was a white glowing deer, and you're going to get your head chopped off.
Yeah. Hey, Harry, how'd you get that scar on your head? I tripped and fell. Definitely wasn't any wizard fights. Nope. Just walking down my stairs, and I fell and cracked my head. Mm-hmm. Yep. Definitely do not have parents that are wizards that were killed by another wizard. Definitely didn't happen.
Yeah, it's funny to joke about that, but I mean, being a young lad working at Toys R Us and having to clean the store at night and coming to the board game section, and your first day of work, you come across the Ouija board. I didn't even fucking straighten them out. I was like, I'm not touching those. It was you kind of get that rush of thought when you experience something like that. It's like, holy shit, why is this goddamn devil thing in a toy store?
Because it's not the devil.
Who's responsible, Mike?
The barn owls.
It's their iPhone. It's anybody who has one they can just tap into.
It is, yeah. And they don't even realize that the whole time that they're so engrossed in this fucking Ouija board, there's a barn owl perched right outside their window, controlling every move that thing makes.
Yep, sucking all the information and data out of their brain.
Pulling it. Another little known fact about barn owls, they have 3 eyes. The one on their forehead opens only when they're utilizing psychic abilities like communication through a Ouija board or manipulating individuals into moving without their consent.
Yeah, they've found out a way to bring their third eye into the physical form on their head. It's like their lizard eyeball.
Yeah, but it's magical.
Yep. So let's get into this case that you're talking about, because like you had said something earlier about how like we were joking about how kids aren't all possessed all over the world, but we heard about that case from Spain. They made a movie about it where some teenage high school girls got a hold of a Ouija board and they were trying to reach out to a dead boyfriend, and then shit went bad. So let's get into this case.
Yeah, there's a lot of, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a few cases that are kind of famous where someone used a Ouija board and ended up getting possessed. And if you recall, that was what happened in The Exorcist as well. Captain Howdy was communicating through the Ouija board that Reagan was using by herself.
Right.
So, but the thing is that was actually based on a true story, which that's a whole other story for a whole other time. But we'll definitely do a episode on that in the future. Maybe around Halloween. That seems like it would be a good Halloween episode.
Yes.
We can talk about The Exorcist and get into so around Halloween time we'll do that. But this case that I want to talk about it's going to be a case that not a lot of people are going to know about. It was actually published in a book called Evil Archaeology by Dr. Heather Lynn. And this book is fucking awesome, for one. If you're into crazy old exorcism rituals or spirit possession in ancient cultures, or protection from evil from fucking Mesopotamia, then this book is for you. But she was discussing demonic possession at one point, and she referenced a letter that she got. she got from a listener of Coast to Coast AM. And she had been on an episode talking about one of her previous books, which had nothing to do with demonic possession, but this woman who goes by the pseudonym Paula sent her this long letter about the kind of like the story of her life in the 90s or a period of time in the 90s. And she said the weirdness in her life started when she had this premonition. She had a dream that her father was going to die. And this feeling got stronger and stronger to the point where it became something that she was expecting, instead of just being like, oh, these are weird thoughts. Like, she really started expecting to get the call. So finally she gets, and I should say her father was perfectly healthy. There was nothing wrong with him. But she gets this call while she's at work from her mother. And it didn't really surprise her when her mother said that her father was dead. And they had found his car parked on the side of the road in California, Southern California. And he had fallen off the side of a cliff into the ocean and got washed away. And his body ended up washing up later. But she had this weird premonition that he was going to die. So it seemed she was basically expecting it. So, it still sucks because who really wants their parents to die? But she just kind of expected it. So finally it happens. They do the funeral and everything. And months later, she ends up getting engaged. And one night, a few weeks before her wedding, all her friends decide to take her out, do the bachelorette party thing, go out drinking, and the end of the night going back to one of her friends' apartments. And they started talking about weird shit, and her friend asked her if she had ever participated in a seance, to which she had not. So she asked if she had ever used a Ouija board. She said she had not. So her group of friends decided to break out the Ouija board, like they're little kids again, and just gather around, get on the thing. And so they started asking it questions, and Paula asks if her father is there. So she said the planchette does the figure 8 thing. That's, the kind of cliche thing at this point that they do. But it ended up going to yes. So at that point, only one of her friends that were present knew about her dad. And she asked how her father died. If her father's there, how did my father die? And it spelled out fall. She never told any of her friends how her father died. So that kind of threw things off for her, and she got freaked out. And she said at that point she got really freaked out and just kind of took her hands off the planchette. And she said when she did, all of a sudden all the candles that they had lit went out and everything was in darkness. So her friend lit a cigarette lighter, and she said when the lighter flashed, she saw a dark shadow-like figure that was hiding in the corner of the room. And she said the figure looked like it was wearing a hat. So kind of get at the shadow person, hat man deal going on here from this. But she said that after she noticed this and they got all the candles lit again, her friend's cat kept looking at that in the corner where she saw this thing, and its ears were laid flat and it was doing low growling and hissing, and finally it just ran away. Like it got freaked out and ran away.
Normal cat ghost behavior.
Yeah. Nothing happened for a while after that. That event freaked her out, but she didn't think too much more about it. She got married, and 5 months later, she went to her husband's parents for Thanksgiving. And she said that she didn't bring anything. She didn't bring like a dish to pass for Thanksgiving or whatever.
Jerk.
Because she's Well, she said she's a terrible cook.
Oh, okay,
So,
good.
because
Don't bring
she's a
your
terrible
garbage.
cook. Yeah, she didn't bring anything, and apparently she overheard her mother-in-law talking to her sister-in-law, kind of being snotty about the fact that Paula didn't bring a dish to pass for Thanksgiving. And for some reason, even though, most people overhearing that would probably feel embarrassment or, like regret, something like that, she said she got mad. And she said the rage boiled up inside of her, and she said it got to the point where all of a sudden, all of the table or all of the dishes that had just been done from Thanksgiving went flying off the drying rack and crashed into the island in the middle of the kitchen.
Whoa.
And she said that it wasn't something that she willed, but she knew that she was the one that caused that. And later that night, they had a far drive, so they decided to spend the night at her husband's parents' house. So later that night, she's in bed, and she wakes up, and she sees this dark figure in the room. It's just standing at the foot of the bed. And as soon as she notices it, the figure retreats to the door of the room, opens it, and kind of beckons her to follow. She follows it, and it ends up going into the kitchen. And all of a sudden, her mother-in-law's dog comes running out, and it bit her on the leg. And right after that happened, the lights turn on, and her mother-in-law is standing there wondering what the hell she's doing. And then her mother-in-law starts asking her why she's just walking around her house naked, because she had no clothes on and has no memory of taking her clothes off. Or she said when she was moving from the bedroom following this thing, it felt like she was floating more than walking. But she ended up getting really pissed off at this dog. And she said when she went back to bed, she just kept picturing herself strangling the dog. And as she was trying to sleep, she said she pictured this dog walking around her mother-in-law's bed. And she just kept picturing grabbing this thing by the neck and breaking its neck. And she fell asleep thinking about that. The next morning, her boyfriend wakes her up because her mother's dog had died in its sleep.
Oh, was he like, did you kill the dog?
No. He, his mother had asked him to ask her if she fed the dog anything out of the ordinary the previous day during Thanksgiving. And she hadn't, but she said that she never shook the feeling that her mother-in-law blamed her for the dog's death. But as months started to go by, and she started becoming really angry, and she started getting a short temper, and she would blow up on her husband for small things. She said that she was unpleasant at work, and at one point she actually verbally abused one of the clients. And then it got so she basically berated him so much that he called her boss, and she ended up having to go to counseling through human resources. And previous to that, she had never been in trouble at work, and she got fine with her husband. But things got so bad between her and her husband that she ended up moving out. So when she moved out, she went to her mom's house and started discussing the issues they were having. And she bought this big salad and brought it over to share with her mom for dinner. And she ended up kind of talking about everything that was going on. And then her mom tells her that she's going to be moving to another state and staying with her sister, her mom's sister, so Paula's aunt. And Paula's aunt had a in-law suite in their house, so her mom was going to move in there. And she said she got so mad at this news that she threw the salad on the floor. She started screaming and swearing at her mom. She then stomped on the food, kicked it around, dropped her pants, and then pissed on it.
Yikes.
And she said she remembers that she didn't even feel embarrassed about it. She just felt completely enraged. And so she left and went to stay at her friend's house.
Just make sure those salads here are all piss on it.
Once she got to her friend's house, though, she said she was in bed, and in the middle of the night, she woke up. And she said it felt like her husband was in the room, and it kind of felt like he was rolling her over in bed so that she would lay on her stomach. And she was kind of groggy, having just woke up. But so she tried to push herself up and turn towards him, and she was forced back down onto the bed. And then she said she felt weight and pressure on top of her, but she said it was cold instead of warm. But it held her in place and she wasn't able to move. And while this was going on, she heard a deep voice in her head. And she said it kind of sounded like it was speaking words, but they weren't words in English. And it wasn't a language that she had recognized. She said after this, she kind of felt like everything was wrong in her life. And she said it felt like she was stuck in a nightmare. And in her mind, all that she could hear were moans and screams, and she was constantly freezing. But she doesn't really remember too much other than that. She said that she slept a lot, but her friend would check in on her, and her friend said that her room smelled terrible. She said it was almost to the point where if she went in, she would feel like she was going to throw up because it smelled so bad in there.
Oh.
And every time she would check on her, her friend said that Paula was in bed, but she was shivering. Her body was shivering so hard that the bed was literally vibrating.
Wow. This is all very heavy shit. I mean, this has elements from almost every possession case we've ever talked about.
Yeah. At one point, Paula's friend tried to wake her up while she was asleep because she was shivering, and she gently shook her shoulder, and Paula opened her eyes and grabbed her friend's wrist so hard that she thought she almost broke it. And her friend then heard a really deep man's voice talking in another language, but it was coming through Paula. So her friend ended up contacting the other friend who actually had the Ouija board. And this girl was apparently a psychic as well. And she thought that maybe Paula was possessed. So her friend started going around to other to churches looking for a priest. So she went. The first priest that she went to didn't take her seriously. Her friend was in her 20s, and she's telling this priest about this crazy shit that's going on with her friend, and he's kind of looking at her with like a mocking half smile, and then started asking Paula's friend if Paula had been taking drugs or if she had been abused, but he never took it seriously. So Paula's friend left the church and started looking up other churches in the area. And she found a church in Sacramento, California that was a Spanish congregation, and the whole mass was done in Spanish. So she thought that maybe they would be more open to helping her. So she found a Mexican priest that spoke English, told him about what was going on, and he agreed to go see Paula. So they went back, and again, more of the classic exorcism stuff, but Paula got up and started yelling at the priest in Spanish, but Paula doesn't know Spanish at all. But that's something that you hear in a lot of possession cases, talking language that they didn't otherwise know.
Right.
But she started insulting the priest, and then she started insulting the priest's mother and called his mother a whore. And then eventually, after this string of obscenities towards the priest, she passed out. So after she passed out, the priest had her friend go into her closet and get belts or straps or things like that, and they tied her arms and legs to the bed frame, just like in The Exorcist. And the priest came back. They ended up doing an exorcism that lasted 4 to 5 days. And anytime they would come in with any holy items, she would start freaking out. And they, at one point, they tried to put the Eucharist in her mouth, and she ended up throwing up across the room. She said that while she was restrained, she ended up breaking through 3 or 4 different belts and was flailing wildly at anyone that would get close enough to her to try to tie her back down. And she resorted to just screaming and growling and swearing in Spanish at the priest. And at one point, according to her friend, because Paula doesn't have any memory of this, but according to her friend, at one point, one of the priests came up to her to tie her back down, and she grabbed him by his belt, picked him up off the floor, and threw him back down. And this apparently hardened the priest's resolve, because they continued to go through this for 4 more days, and eventually they were able to get it out. But before it left, there was a symbol that appeared to be scratched into her stomach. And she said it looked like a combination of a 7 and an S that was scratched into her stomach. So once this happened, the priests decided to, they found out she wasn't baptized, so they went through with a baptism, and they poured the holy water on her head, did the whole rite of baptism. And she said when the holy water hit her head, it felt like her face was on fire, and her eyes rolled back in her head, and the water, she said, steamed off of her forehead. And then she fell back down, went limp, and when she woke up, whatever was inside of her was gone. But she said while she was passed out, she had a dream that she was in darkness, but then the darkness around her turned into a giant bat-like thing, and it flew away. And as soon as it flew away, light flooded in, and then she woke up, and that's when she was free of whatever was in her. And nothing has bothered her ever since. She said after that ordeal, she ended up getting back with her husband. She kind of explained what happened, and they both ended up becoming devout Christians, and they go to church together every week. And she said it's whatever that thing was has stayed away. She hasn't seen the shadow figure. She hasn't experienced any of these wild mood swings or heard any voices or screams or moans like she was hearing. And everything seems to be going in her favor at this point.
Her mother's still...
Yeah, her mother-in-law's probably like, yeah, right, hussy.
Her mother still won't allow salad in her house, and the father who helped her has still issued a street fight for what he said about what she said about his mother.
Yeah. If I ever see you on the street, bitch, so help me God.
I'm glad I could help you, but I'm gonna kidney punch the shit out of you.
Yeah. I know it wasn't you saying those things, but when I see your fucking face, I just want to punch it for the things you said to my mom. My mother was a saint. But that's just kind of one example. But it's, when you look at it, it's got all of the hallmarks of a classic possession case. And in a lot of ways, it even parallels what happens in the Exorcist movie. So was this a genuine case? Or was this just somebody who thought that they could fool a doctor that was on Coast to Coast? They're like, I'll tell them the story. Because it does match a lot of the stories, but it doesn't match because there's a pattern with what happens during possession cases, or does it match because it seems like that's the cliche thing to do when you're possessed?
Yeah, it's for me with this case, there's a lot of stuff that's going on. It's all the classic stuff. It's very severe, even though it's not. It feels that way. And that's one thing that kind of, maybe it's not a red flag, but kind of makes me get a little bit alert about the story, is that the story feels like a story. it's very severe, but not, she wasn't climbing up the walls and rocks weren't raining down from the ceiling, as bad as some cases we've talked about in the past. But it kind of, I don't know, it sounds like a really bad infection. You get a weird feeling from the story. So it sounds and feels a little bit written, but those sure are the hallmarks of all possession cases. It's just, when did this story come out on Coast to Coast?
Well, the story didn't come out on Coast to Coast. She was the author, Dr. Lynn, was on Coast to Coast in 2014, and she got this letter. The events in the letter took place in the 90s.
Okay, so if she got this in 2014, that's well underway into all the Ring movies and the hype with all that stuff. So, I mean, it sounds like a sample from every goddamn possession movie ever made, but who's to say?
Who is to say?
It's a very, very weird case, though. It sounds it's very interesting. It gives me such a weird feeling to them messing with this Ouija board, and it's like almost like she caught something, and we know that it's an attachment, something obviously connected itself to her, and we know how that goes. But to me, it just gives me a feeling of like she caught this weird virus, and it really infected her. Pissing on salads at Mama's house, Jesus.
Maybe she just really doesn't like salad. Maybe she's like, you know what?
Is this blue cheese?
She looked in there and she's like, those sons of bitches. I asked for romaine lettuce. This is clearly iceberg lettuce. I will show them my disdain by pissing upon their shitty lettuce.
Mom, you didn't see that this was fucking romaine? Huh? You clean up this piss salad now, you fucking old bitch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that couldn't have been just a clean pee, right? If you're enraged, there could have been some debris.
Yeah, maybe a nice angry fart as you're trying to push the pee out. Yeah.
Maybe a demonic shark.
Oh, a demonic shark. It's like molten lava coming out of your asshole.
Yep, a little loogie-sized piece of brimstone.
Oh, who needs pea soup? I got lava shits.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.